Representative Persell, thank you very much for joining us. If you can begin by telling us a little bit about your home life and what you've done in the past.
I've lived up in the Bemidji area for, since the mid-70s. Came there when I got out of the military. Proud United States Air Force veteran, disabled vet, and built a house there, and I've worked, been honored to work on the Leech Lake Indian Reservation since 1978, and doing various tasks. I ran a small laboratory for 28 years, and most recently worked as an environmental policy analyst for the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe, and been very involved in environmental quality issues, water chemistry and aquatic biology. That's my training from college, and it's what I've done a lot of. I did lose my first wife to cancer in 2007. I remarried. I had 3 children, now I have 5. Had a half a dozen grandkids, now I have 10. And we had 26 stockings hung for this past Christmas. And all but 2 were spoken for, and those 2 were my son John and his wife, who are in Dublin, Ireland, and couldn't get back. So we had a wonderful Christmas. Went ice fishing, caught fish, grandkids, had fun, and that's everything else about Christmas could go to heck in a handbasket, and if I can take my grandkids fishing and catch fish, life is good.
Can you tell us about some of the legislation you've worked on in the past and the legislation you are most proud of?
When this subject comes up, I'm probably, it takes a legislature and everybody to pass laws, and so every once in a while we legislators have the opportunity and honor to carry legislation that is personally meaningful to us. And as a veteran and for other reasons as well, a piece of legislation that I guess I would hang my hat on if I had to hang a hat today would be getting PTSD into workman's comp. Certainly know my share of PTSD veterans, and that ailment can happen to almost anybody. And this particular legislation arose out of the Red Lake school shootings 10 years ago, and teachers that were being denied workman's comp because PTSD was not an allowable ailment. And so I think we take ourselves a long way forward in bringing mental health issues out of the closet, as it were, and recognizing that the head's part of the body, and we've got to deal with all of our human body when we talk about medical. So that stands out. There's been other things with environmental quality, getting bisphenol A out of children's products in Minnesota. I mean, some things like that. That kind of standard fare for my environmental quality background, but that's a pretty big deal. And I continue now in my involvement in early childhood education, and I'm on this fiscal disparities legislative work group, and I'm digging into that about as hard as I can, because many people may not know I represent one of the poorest districts in the state of Minnesota.
Can you tell us more about your district and what your constituents care about?
My district is north central Minnesota, and 63 townships, if memory serves. The Leech Lake Indian Reservation makes up most of the geography of my district. The city of Bemidji, most of the population of my district. School District 115 in Cass Lake, Minnesota is about 65% Native American. My new family is Native American. My wife, Teresa, happily married, and so I've been involved in issues surrounding Native Americans and the circumstances that they may find themselves in. But people in my district care about the same things that people all across Minnesota care about, and that is making Minnesota as good as it can be, upholding our Constitution that we're going to educate all of our children in Minnesota, and making sure that we do that well. Let's do the best we can for employment, and that it's what everybody in Minnesota cares about, at least the folks that I talk to in Minnesota.
What have you found to be the most rewarding aspect of being a legislator?
It's just such an honor to work in this institution, this government. I never envisioned that this would be where I may be part of this. It really didn't. I was a township officer in Frone Township, proud Frone Township board member. Served on the Beltrami County Soil and Water Board. So I find myself in this, and for me it's always been about issues, and are we doing what we need to do for all Minnesotans, and certainly I think the impact of living where I live has something to do with that, and the poverty and the needs, if you will, of the folks in my district. And I know there are plenty of other needs in Minnesota, but trying to make sure that the opportunities are there. I remember when I was campaigning, my first go at it in 2008, and I remember door knocked darn near every door in Bemidji, Cass Lake, Walker. I mean, I wore out a pair of boots, literally. I had holes in the bottom of my boots. And I remember walking up to this one door in Bemidji. I could take you to it, but I can't remember the street. I think it's off of America Avenue. It was an older gentleman, and I knocked on the door, and yeah, I'm John Persell, and shook his hand. And he was using a cane, as I am today, for my veterans' disabilities, and so we got talking about military, and he was Army, WW2, and we're both kind of conservative, and I remember the conversation was ending, and I said, well, that old song, that this big bad world don't owe you a thing, and you may know that song as an Eagles tune, maybe not. And he just turned and he looked at me, and his eyes were as bright as they could be, and he said, "Accept an opportunity." I remember that stuck with me, because he didn't have much at a house, but just probably living on Medicare and Social Security, but he was very definitive, and I believe that too. Everybody should have an opportunity, and so that's our charge, is to ensure that all Minnesotans have that opportunity, all Americans should have that opportunity.
If you had an extra hour in the day, how would you spend it?
I guess it would depend on the day. If it was a weekend, I'd be ice fishing with the grandkids. If I had an extra hour in the day down here in the St. Paul area, I likely would spend it talking to my colleagues or others that were interested in legislation we're working on, issues we're working on, and as I said, indicated earlier, this fiscal disparities, that's a big deal, and it speaks to the opportunity issue that I just spoke of. Trying to talk. I like to sit down and have coffee with anybody that'll do that. Republican, Democrat, whatever, and make those connections. And I have good friends on the Republican side of the aisle, being a Democrat as I am, and good friends in all of Minnesota. But that's, let's just be Minnesotans and work on the issues. That's what I like to do.
Representative Persell, thank you for your time.
Thank you.